My guest today thought she had all she ever dreamed of for her life, but then found herself in a situation she never could have imagined. That painful mistake showed her that she was missing something important. She's here to tell us more. Alli Patterson, thanks so much for joining us.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. It's great to be with you today.
It's great to have you. And I want to dive right into this because, you had a successful career, what you thought was a strong marriage, a deep faith, but actually the mistake that tore up your life, it was a workplace affair. So tell me about the circumstances that led up to that, because you weren't ever, like most people, not thinking you were ever going to do that.
Of course not. Yes. I was pretty young in a corporate job, and I really felt strong and capable, and I had some blind spots that I just did not see. I wasn't aware of some things inside of me that were off. And so I left myself open to what I thought was actually a friendship that was even a friendship where we discussed spiritual things. And I did not realize the kind of intimacy that we were building in this friendship that happened through work. And it really opened me up to the affair that I ended up having. And I think in part, I did not realize some of the things that I needed to be standing on, some of the strength that I needed in my own character, in my marriage, in my relationship with God. And I didn't see until it was too late that I didn't have some of those things.
Now we're going to talk about that in a moment. But, I think it's so amazing that you decided to confess to your husband. Nobody forced you to do it. You decided to do that. Talk to me about that and then the journey of healing.
Yes, I cannot stress to you enough how crucial this moment was. I wasn't even aware of how important this would be at the time. But this affair was the way that God was coming back into my life. I knew I had come to a real relationship. I had a real faith in Jesus from my older teenage years, and I had drifted, obviously. However, I knew that God was pressing in on my life. I knew that I was living in a way that was not what He would have for me. And certainly it was eating me from the inside out, and I could feel it and I knew it. When I confessed to my husband, it was an act of obedience to God. It was not because I thought I could save my marriage. It was not because I wanted to. It was not because I didn't see all the pain coming. I did, and I hated every second of it. And also I knew from what I knew of God and just my interactions with Him at the time, which I'm happy to share some of those. I knew nothing real can happen in my life from this moment forward until there's honesty, until the truth is on the table. So that moment when I confessed was truly an act of obedience to God and nothing else. I thought I was ruining my entire life when I did it.
And you weren't wrong, because your life for a while there was really, really, really terrible. So how in the world did you rebuild your marriage? Because I know a lot of marriages, that's the point, that's the beginning of the end, I guess, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, what I know is what we saw of God was nothing short of miraculous. All I asked of my husband is that he would ask God where to go from here. And I had no leg to stand on. And what we saw was the more we surrounded ourselves with people who loved Jesus to help us, and the more we individually began to heal and move toward Him as individuals, the more He gave us circumstances to come back together. And I know that that's not everyone's story. I really do understand that. But I do believe when two people are seeking God genuinely, He's for our marriages. And He will offer us the circumstances to heal, and He will give us the resources to forgive. And He absolutely can and wants to rebuild. And we started from ground zero. Everything was pretty much burned to the ground. And to be honest, I didn't think we had much of a shot. I wasn't even sure he would stay for a long time. But slowly, we began to realize that he really could help us. And there were lots of ways that we discovered that. One of the things that I have said to a lot of people is don't be in a hurry to leave, because God does need time. Healing takes time, and forgiveness takes time, and regaining trust takes time. And I think a lot of times people run out the door in their grief and anger and sadness. And believe me, we would understand that. However, I think when we're not in a hurry to leave, we leave room for God to heal.
I think what's really neat about your story is that he didn't just rebuild your marriage, but he rebuilt you. And you talk about, that you realized that your foundation needed work, that it wasn't built on something solid. You wrote a book about this called How to Stay Standing, 3 Essential Practices for Building a Faith That Lasts. So for those watching right now, how do we know if our foundation is strong before, we do something that we profoundly regret?
Yes, I'm so glad you put it that way, because I know that some people will encounter the book and they'll be where I was. They'll be in trouble. Maybe it's not a full collapse, but something in their life is going wrong. There's shifting sand, so they're reaching out. But I think we can proactively build a connection with Jesus that starts to strengthen our life from the inside out, like from the ground up, literally the foundation up. And that's where I made the mistake that I did not see I was making. We all do what we can do at the time. We do what we think is right. And what I did is I built a life that looked like what the world says your life should look like. I got good grades. I got a great job. I found a great guy. And I built what I would say is a house, if you will, that looked really strong. But if the house isn't standing on a foundation of deep strength and faith in Jesus, well, he tells a parable, and that parable is at the heart of the book. And he says, more or less, anything that is not built on me, no matter how good it looks from the outside, it will eventually fall.
Yeah, and it's really important what you said, because even the Bible says, if you think that you stand strong, take heed lest you fall. We should live with an awareness that we are vulnerable. We all are. And, as we look at our foundation, you say the first step is to come to God with a fully open heart, but that we make a lot of excuses not to do that. Why do we resist what is so good for us?
Okay, so this is undoubtedly the most unexpected thing that I have ended up talking the most about with the book. This first practice that Jesus talks about, and the 3 practices of the book, they come straight from the words of Jesus. And the first thing he says is, come to me. And I didn't realize how revolutionary this would be, even for people who have tried to follow Jesus for a long time. If you look in the scriptures about where he makes this invitation, where he gives this command sometimes, he says, come to me. And for me, coming to Jesus was not a small thing. It was a great cost to me at the time. I think I said my confession to my husband was an act of obedience to God. It was the moment that I actually decided to come to him. But you don't have to be in a mess to come to Jesus. We can do this all the time. It does require, however, that we get what I like to say is brutally honest, radically honest with God. And we don't like this. We want to close one eye to who we really are, or to the sin in our life, or maybe it's not even sin, just the things we don't know about ourselves, little things that feel off in our character or our marriages or how we approach our work, just everyday things. And truth be told, we know they're not quite right. We know we're not really standing firm, but we don't want to engage God until and unless we get into trouble, but you don't have to wait. I find myself now walking down the street and I'll say, I'll take walks. Sometimes I talk to God. I'm on a walk and I'll say something like, listen, I don't really know what's going on here, but honestly, I just don't feel right. Every time this thing happens, what's going on there? And I ask God questions. I come to him because I've learned that he wants to engage us, but the price of entry is brutal honesty. God cannot heal what you're pretending isn't broken. God cannot help with situations you don't want to fully look at. So that's the price of entry. And it is everything to building what's real and what's strong and what works. And we just don't want to do it. And so we wait too long. We wait till things shift or stuff happens. And in my particular case, until there's a big collapse. And unfortunately, that's a lot of our stories.
Thinking about someone watching this interview, and maybe they are in that broken place. And one of the beautiful things about your story is when you felt completely crushed by the decisions and the consequences of it, God met you in such a gracious and kind and beautiful way. Could you just speak some encouragement to someone right now who feels like, and maybe their whole life has just completely fallen apart, or they have a secret that they're hiding that they're so scared to talk about? Talk to them about how God might meet them.
Oh my gosh. What I discovered in this time in my life has completely reshaped my view of God. I've experienced him in ways I can never unsee. I can never go back on, because who I met during that time was, when I'm willing to come to him and actually do what his word says, actually practice trying to follow him, the God that I encountered was gracious beyond belief, powerful beyond belief, wanted to heal places in me that I didn't even know were off. And what was waiting for me in those spaces that I thought were nothing but darkness, nothing but brokenness, what was waiting for me in those spaces when I would ask him, what do I do now? Will you come into this place with me? Because I don't know how to get out of this. What I found was a God who was happy to answer me. He was happy that I asked. And it was kindness and graciousness beyond what I knew I deserved. And that's absolutely the heart of the gospel, is we bring our broken selves to him, and he meets us in those places. And as we're willing to follow him, he brings us not only out of that, not only wipes away everything that was before, pays for all of that sin, all of that brokenness, all of that darkness, but he actually has a life waiting for you. And that's what I discovered. And that's been the delight of my entire life, is to discover this God that knew who I was better than I did, and actually had a much different and much better life waiting for me.
Oh, that is so beautiful. I could just talk to you forever. Thank you, Alli, so much for the courage it took to share your story, and for really wanting to help people protect themselves and build that strong foundation. So thankful for you.